My name is Mark Matusik. I'm glad that you're here. Let me just tell you a little bit about myself to give you a sense of who I am and what I do and why I do it. I've been writing ever since I was a very young boy. I grew up in a house where there was a lot of confusion and loss and pain. And I learned at a very early age that the best way for me personally to deal with my pain and to make sense of what was going on around me, which often didn't make a lot of sense, was to put it down on paper. So I started at a very young age, probably 6 or 7, to keep a journal. And when things got hard, that was the first place I went. And it really became a survival tool for me, as it is for many writers, to make sense of the world around me. It also seemed to me that if you didn't write down your stories, nobody ever would. So I felt like it was my job to be the witness. And as the witness, that gave me the space, a little bit of distance between myself and the experiences that were so hard, to understand and to feel and to become the person who could survive these things. Really, writing for me from a very young age was a way of surviving. It's how I saved my life. My work really centers on self-inquiry. Self-inquiry as a literary practice, what I call life writing, but also self-inquiry as a spiritual practice. Who am I? We're all asking ourselves that question all the time. We don't realize it, but most of us are asking ourselves that question dozens and dozens of times a day. Who am I? How am I doing? What do I care about? Where am I going? And trying to find our way through this labyrinth of life with some sense of ourselves intact, our integrity, and our values. So for me, writing is a pursuit of meaning and a vehicle for self-exploration. I see language as a power tool for self-exploration and a sort of personal archaeology. And if we do that well enough, if we take enough care with our work and we take it seriously enough, then the deeply personal opens out onto the universal. When people are reading your story, and this is a concern for a lot of memoirists, fear of being narcissistic or self-absorbed. When people are reading your story, they're not reading about you, they're reading about themselves. So if you can touch deeply enough on the human experience, then it opens out onto the universal, and the details of your personal life become a means of understanding for your readers, regardless of how different their lives may be. So when we realize that writing is a source of deep connection through the personal to the universal, then memoir writing becomes very, very exciting. You realize that you're doing the work for everyone else too, that you're taking the human journey. You're not writing about your experience, you're writing about the experience. You're not writing about your personal suffering, you're writing about the suffering. You're not writing about your personal insight or enlightenment, you're writing about human enlightenment and our potential for awakening. That's at the core of everything that I do, is this deep belief in the prospect of human awakening. Writing is a very deep relationship. It's a deep relationship with the self primarily, but then it becomes a dialogue with others. And so it's a source of connection and wisdom, and it's a source of opening onto a larger understanding of the world, which is so important. We always have at our disposal the ability to create from experience something beautiful, something profound, and something that can last. That's the amazing thing about writing memoir. It's not just for our own posterity. The work that I do with students is all about self-discovery. I am as much a writing teacher as I am a mentor or a spiritual friend to the people who work with me. I deeply believe in the power of the human heart to open and discover itself in ways that it doesn't ordinarily do. And only does when we decide to take a deep inner journey. So my students are my companions on the spiritual path. I do my best to give whatever advice I can without in any way thinking that I am a master or a guru. My work is to help guide them through questions to their own core, to find out who most authentically they are, what they believe and what they don't believe, what they're afraid of, what stories they tell themselves about why they are who they are and how they got where they are, which is often it's a shock for people to realize that they are living their lives according to stories and myths and received ideas, suppositions and conditioning that they're not aware of. And as soon as we do that, as soon as we become aware of the conditioning that's driving us, then we are free to change it. We're free to look at different ways of being and different directions that we might want to take. I'm fascinated by how closely fear and desire operate in our lives. You can also think of it as anxiety and excitement. Someone said to me recently that anxiety is excitement holding its breath. And when you realize that it's the same energy driving you toward what you want, that's holding you back because it scares you by its intensity or because it's uncomfortable, that's extremely liberating. That gives you the power to look at your fear, to coexist with your fear or anxiety, and say, I'm going to move forward anyway. And my work is all about helping people move forward anyway. The transformations that happen in my students are so exciting to me. It's so inspiring. I see it all the time. People doing things they didn't think they could do, saying the unsayable things. Dorothy Allison, who's a wonderful novelist, once talked about telling the scary story. That's the story that we're here to tell together. We're here to go into the dark together and come out the other side. I'm not interested in people repeating cliches or playing it safe. The work that I do is all about moving outside our comfort zone and growing as individuals, as creators, as lovers, and as seekers. It's all about pushing the envelope. It's about moving outside our comfort zone and looking behind and saying, why did I think I was so stuck? What was I so afraid of? And the reason I can do this work is that I've done it myself in my life for so many years under duress. So many times I've come up against something I thought I couldn't get through. And you find that if you keep moving forward, you amaze yourself. And you realize that your limitations were based on past experience, which is not the whole picture. When you step enough times beyond your own limitations, you realize that you can do it, and that muscle of perception gets stronger. So you're not quite so daunted when bad things happen to you, or when you come up against your own terrors. You don't let it stop you and shrink you. You don't shrink to fit your own fears. You move beyond your own fears and challenge your own fears. And that's what trauma does. That's the value of trauma, is it forces you to realize that the story you've been living is just a story, and that you're actually much bigger and more imaginative than you thought you were, and that you have the ability to be larger than your story. You are not your story, and that's the most important thing to realize. You're having an experience, but that experience is not a story. And when you write about your experience, you realize how arbitrary story is, and you realize how what you tell yourself to be true is just, it's a myth, and the myth changes. I'm here to remind my students and to remind my readers through my work to remember that this whole thing is miracle. This whole thing it truly is a gift. Not in a saccharine kind of way, but in the deepest sense. We don't know why we're here. The chances of being alive at any moment on this miraculous planet are so infinitesimally small that when you get that and you realize that in a certain way you're dancing on the head of a pin in the universe, it changes your attitude to the bad things that happen to you and to the challenges. You welcome the adversity in your life because you're glad to be here to be able to have the experience. And that's something that's important to remember. It's why I wrote When You're Falling Dive, to remind people that this experience is a miracle. And that when you see your life that way, it changes everything.